Hi, my name is Sydney Grusha, and I did my World War II project on the movie Apocalypse Now. The movie Apocalypse Now came out in the year 1979. It was largely based off of the well-known Vietnam War, which occurred between 1955 through 1975. During this time, Apocalypse Now detailed graphic images of how daunting the war was as seen through the eyes of U.S. soldiers. Main soldier Captain Willard takes us through a perilous and increasingly hallucinatory journey where he must kill Colonel Kurtz, a once strong and prosperous member of the war who's gone mentally insane. This movie encompasses the Vietnam War through its qualities of combat, authority, and purpose. As a viewer of this film, the quality of authority is prevalent and seen through Captain Willard, the lieutenant, and as well Colonel Kurtz. Throughout Willard's journey, he comes across many different people and places in which he is placed in a vulnerable position. As an ex-soldier re-arising in his field who once achieved many goals, he must take initiative with whoever he meets to be able to conquer his undocumented mission. We notice him take on a leadership role with his boatmates, an ex-surfer, a city man, and a crazed freelance photographer. Whenever they go to a new area, he is the first to step foot onto the unknown land and as well the first to talk to the people they come across. His boatmates, who once looked to each other, now look to him as a leader and a sense of proper authority due to his prior experience in this field of work. We as well come across the crazy lieutenant who's pictured here. He obsesses over surfing. One scene in particular has him demand to his soldiers that they undress and jump into the freezing cold water that is being bombed so that they can go to enjoy the waves. His men do not think twice about this statement and do what they are told because he holds such a grand role and position of importance in their minds. The ability that Willard and the lieutenant have to almost control the minds of the innocent shows how mentally weak the soldiers were during this time, since they would look for any sort of routine or instruction from a higher power, no matter how psychotic it was, so that they would not have to fend for themselves. The quality of combat was a very repetitive part of this film, as almost every scene had a murder, fight, or bombing in it, but I think that quality of combat was shown in greatest significance at the ending scene where Willard murders Kurtz. Because that picture is so graphic, I actually chose the picture of the bull or cow getting murdered, which occurred at the same time. But although this movie is filled with combat, fighting, wars, and death, this final scene proves how stealth, sly, and strong these men had to be to conquer the enemy. Willard was on Kurtz's island where all natives bowed down to him and was up against a dominant power and placed in an inferior position. Without any fear, Willard took it upon himself to sneak behind Kurtz and continuously slice him apart with a machete until he could no longer breathe. This task was unheard of at the time and took a lot of planning and distraction to complete. The quality of combat that Willard used was very direct, severe, and shrewd, which make it so that he could prosper and win in the end against a once undefeated colonel. Willard's purpose in this movie was to complete a nearly impossible undocumented mission in which he was unable to say no to or without giving his all. In the end, Willard's battle was to kill Kurtz or end up dead trying to. This purpose was due to a change in character from Kurtz, who went mental and then disobeyed government orders. Because he caused havoc in the war and with the army, Willard had to step in to terminate him and help the government. Upon researching about the time frame between 1968 through 1979, I came across the Democratic National Convention, COINTELPRO, and Watergate. These three events stuck out to me because they related to parts of the movie but as well showed the traits of authority, combat, and purpose. The Democratic National Convention was where thousands of Vietnam War protesters battled police in the streets while the Democratic Party fell apart over an internal disagreement concerning its stance on Vietnam. This showed authority because we saw ex-soldiers come together to fight for a cause that they believed in against the government and, as well, the police. This shows how strongly they believed in their opinion, but as well how they could all come together to create a larger impact on the war, which was to get more people to recognize that they were not okay with what the government was doing relating communism and that it was wrong. I think that the authority they took to come together and protest, but as well fight, showed how much they opposed war and wanted people to stop being deployed but instead stay home. I think this can be related to how soldiers in Vietnam and also on Willard's boat wanted to go home and missed simple things like seeing a woman on the daily basis. As well, on this night, President Nixon was voted into office because he promised to bring us together as the United States. This was one thing that was missing and broken during the Democratic National Convention due to the fighting and separation of veteran versus police. Having him as president changed a lot in the war based on his style of being in power. Over 1/3 of soldiers in the war were killed during his presidency, which negatively impacted the U.S. in the war. The trait of combat was shown through Watergate, where there was a subversion to democratic order through criminal acts, levying of domestic warfare against political opponents through espionage and sabotage. Nixon was caught blindsided on a matter of national security, and in the end, Watergate occurred because of Nixon's administration's attempt to cover up its involvement in the Democratic National Committee break-in, where burglars attempted to steal FBI files and intercept telephones and other communications. This relates to the movie because during Nixon's presidency, everything fell apart because of his absurd and crazy ideas and wrong sense of leadership. The lieutenant shows many of the same traits as Nixon because he as well had crazy ideas like surfing and flying in a cow in a war zone to make steaks for his soldiers. Finally, COINTELPRO represents purpose in its way of being a formal counterintelligence program against the Communist Party. Their goals and purpose was to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize any Communist Party. They were there to disrupt the activities of the Communist Party, including veterans of the war. This relates to the war because the nonviolent organizations and individuals were targeted because the Bureau believed they represented a potential for violence. In my belief, this relates to the movie because in one scene, Kurtz takes Willard and starves and abuses him until he almost dies. He did this because he knew that Willard was there to disrupt his life and potentially cause violence on his land. The reasoning used in this movie and in COINTELPRO both are trying to prohibit violence from happening and from allowing a possible stronger power to come in and win. This is the end of my project, and I really hope you learned something and enjoyed. Thank you.